Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead Podcast. We're your host, Lisa.
And Kevin.
And on today's episode, we are doing our season finale. So join us as we talk about the season that was and the season that will be. Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead. Come along with us on our journey from a small suburban homestead lifestyle
to our new lifestyle, homesteading in the rural countryside of southern Arizona.
We'll share with you our tips, tricks, successes, and failures.
From both our past suburban lifestyle to our new rural lifestyle,
all on the 2 Acre Homestead. Welcome back. We're happy to have you guys here at our homestead, and we are at the season finale. I'm super excited. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I was just thinking this has been just shy of 2 years doing the podcast.
Just shy, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So when we go into January 2024, that's
January
the beginning
1st
of our third year.
Yep.
Crazy, but it's been cool.
Yeah.
It's been a good experience.
So you guys, this season took a couple of twists and turns. There were some things going on the back end that we don't really discuss with you guys. So we're just going to take out a couple of seconds, just a brief couple of minutes rather, just to tell you how we got to the topic of finances on this particular season when we were supposed to be talking about homeschooling. So the back end, usually what we do is prior the season, before we air, we start recording any interviews that we have planned. And we just had a series of cancellations, and unfortunately, some of the cancellations were of major and serious issues. They weren't just, people canceling just to be canceling. But, and then there were a couple of people that we were going to interview as well, and they got a little flighty. So hopefully we will be revisiting the subject of homeschooling in a later season, when we have better group of people lined up, for that particular subject. But as it is, the world kind of decided to take a twist and turn, and we decided to keep up with what was going on and talk about things that are relevant to those of you who are listening, who are interested in homesteading and who are homesteading, who are trying to do it. And finances is a huge thing. And we really feel like, I don't know about you, Kevin, but I really feel like in the homesteading community, we really don't talk a whole lot about finances. You hear a lot of people say, pay off your debt, pay off your debt. And of course, we preach that as well. Keep, pay off your debt, stay out of debt. But, how do you stay out of debt? How do you get to a point where you can pay off your debt? How do you prioritize things? So how do you think we did this season on that topic?
I think good. And, I think I was thinking, especially when we did that episode that talked about the finances, like you mentioned, I was thinking about it this way. There was a time, I do have a secular job. So there was a time, I would say a few years back, where a guy I worked with didn't understand why we raised chickens and so on. And, he basically said one of those comments like, well, isn't it just cheaper to, get them at the store? And, maybe there are things like that, yeah, that are cheaper. But I said, yeah, but that's not, the only thing that goes into a decision. And so it's just interesting to hear people's perspectives. But I think for me, I don't know how about you feel about this, but I think one thing over the past few years that I've learned when we've, been on this road as far as homesteading, We've done more and more as time has gone on. I think it's gotten me to kind of reflect on what would it have been like 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago when this was more of the norm everywhere, at least here in the US. I don't, we always try to kind of focus on that. But, there are parts of the country where we've talked about this, where people do this a bit more. It's more common, as far as, you could go and you could know dozens of families on the same street that maybe live this lifestyle. But I think for me, when you hear all these things the past few years where inflation has been up, the prices of the basic goods, the staples that you eat and so on have gone up, and people are having trouble managing those things. And it's gotten me to think about, we've been kind of taught to get on that treadmill of everything is convenience. And it's, over the decades, I guess if you go back to the 50s where the TV dinners came out and, things were supposed to be easier, microwaves and all that kind of thing, but it just kept going and going and going. And at some point, there's just so much quote unquote convenience that in some respects you have to ask yourself, is it really costing you less, or is it making things a lot more complicated? And I think for me, homesteading and doing things like trying to save, be economical with things like feed and all these different things has gotten me to really think about that. All the convenience, are we as homesteaders trying to get away from that? And I think for us, we are. Mm-hmm. It's helped us to do that. It's helped us to be frugal with things like, preserving food in different ways and so on. So I think in those respects, it's kind of helped in situations like this and help us to be prepared as much as we can. There's only so much you can do, but I think it's provided some good values for us, to live by. So I think it's been good.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I mean, as homesteaders, we see the world through a different lens. And I think you're right when you say about convenience. This world, everything is about, quick and easy and convenient so you can be on and go on and do other things. And it's like, well, that's great. But you know what? Real life isn't convenient. And when you stop to think about how quote unquote inconvenient real sustainable living is, although I'm saying this, but I think that, sustainable living, homestead living is convenient. Okay. Just for the record. But for those people who think that, homesteading is a little bit crazy, and they say, oh, homesteading is inconvenient. Well, life is inconvenient. And real life is inconvenient. And I think that as homesteaders, we have kind of a grip on what real life is, what the reality of life is, because we face it every day on our homestead. Not this past season, but the season before, we had a kid die, a goat kid. And, to look at an animal fighting for its life and knowing that it's dying and seeing life and death on your homestead and knowing that, you are a part of that, whether it be, you're seeing an animal like, the kid that we had, the goat kid that we had, a couple months ago that died, or, culling chickens, you're seeing life and death. You're seeing life come and you're seeing life go. So,
and you're taking, or you're making the efforts to do the best that you can to give them, good quality of life, like for example, chickens, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I always think about the, Costco. I'm just going to say it. They sell those chickens for $5, but there's a reason why they're so cheap.
Oh yeah.
And they're pumped with all this stuff, but they're not healthy. And I heard another podcast or another podcaster say something along the lines of, we're not going for perfection. I like that saying. We're not going for perfection. We still fight the urge sometimes to get food out, right? But we try our best. The chicken, for example, we try to raise it ourselves. We know that that's going to be healthier than the stuff we buy at the store, big box included. And that's a big driver, I think, too, of why we homestead. We can definitely see and taste a difference from what we eat, the chicken. I think you mentioned this recently, the beef. Now, we don't raise cows on our property.
Wish we did.
But
we
that's
don't
another
have the room
topic
for it. Yeah.
But the beef that we do buy, we try to buy in bulk and get it
sourced
local. And we even had some tonight, a steak and
porterhouse steak. It was really
porterhouse,
good.
And it was it's grass fed and grass finished. And I know I've mentioned this. I can tell a difference in how that beef tastes. And so that's part of it. So even if we're not processing or raising those animals ourselves, part of the whole homesteading thing is trying to source locally. We do that with milk, with raw milk and so on as well. But that's part of the whole process. So we notice a difference. And we're not going necessarily for, well, not even necessarily, we're not going for the cheapest, this and that. And we see a difference, in how it tastes.
Yeah. And how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I know for me, years ago, I thought I was lactose intolerant. I learned that I'm intolerant to the
processed milk,
the ultra pasteurized milk. And that's my experience. So total difference in drinking it. I know when you've made cheese and making ice cream and so on, and it's a total different taste, but also I feel better. So, that's part of the whole process, and definitely worth it in my book.
Yeah. And, and that's the thing, we've been talking all this season about finances, and, the world just took such a dip financially, and it's really affected the bottom line of, even those of us who try to live as sustainably as possible. We like to call it a closed loop system here on our homestead, meaning that there's hardly very little input from the outside world, meaning we don't have to buy as much feed. Basically all we buy is scratch grains and hay. Everything else, like for our chickens, when I say scratch grains, I mean like we buy the seeds. So we buy Milo, we buy barley, we buy
oats, rolled
oats,
and then
cracked corn. And we give them a little bit of that, but the bulk of what they eat is the scraps that come from our table.
Right. And some people are surprised when you say this, but you feed them, you can feed them cooked eggs. You don't feed them chicken, but you can feed them cooked eggs. You can feed them the shells that they produce. And of course, vegetable scraps.
Yeah. You can feed them a host of things. But anyway, so we try to create these systems in place on our homestead where we have just a little bit of input from the outside world. But, and even when you are trying to homestead in that way, where your animals are out on pasture, where your chickens maybe are free ranging and they're eating bugs and what have you, it's still, homesteading is not cheap. It's not an inexpensive endeavor. And I hate to say it that way, but that is the truth. I mean, things cost money.
Yeah, if you go to a farmer's market and you look at the fact, I haven't been to one lately, but if you are used to paying $3-4 for a dozen eggs, and you go to your farmer's market and they're $8 or $9.
Oh,
I've
man.
heard this before. Then you're like, well,
Yeah.
why are they that expensive? But you learn when homesteading, there's a bit more to it. Some of it might be paying for your time, the person that's charging that, but the costs of certain things. And if those individuals are using organic grains and so on. So there's a whole list of things. But again, something I've kind of thought about is there's a reason why those things at the stores are quote unquote cheaper, because the factories where the chickens are just
Their
right next to
ingredients
each
are
other.
less quality.
The ingredients are less quality. The chickens live right next to there's no room for them to move and so on. There's cage free is just a label. They don't really get much sun. So anyway, that's a whole other topic, but there's a reason why that stuff's cheaper and it's not as good for you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to build a homestead from the ground up? Or maybe you're looking to build an off-grid dream home, a vacation home, or maybe just a piece of land to call your own. Visit yourcheapland.com to buy rural land in the wide open spaces of southwestern United States. When you visit yourcheapland.com, they're here to help you, and with their help, you can do this. You can take your dream of owning land and make it a reality. Most down payments are only $294, including the document fee. Remember, everyone qualifies for financing at yourcheapland.com. Head on over to yourcheapland.com and start making those dreams come true. And now, back to our podcast. So, we've talked about financial storm, increasing the value of your homestead. We did do interview with Natalie from Living the Dream. But yeah, that we did several episodes on financial. So yeah, and that's really the point, for me, is that homesteading does cost money. You can do it inexpensively. You can get yourself started inexpensively. And we do have an episode on that. And we also have a downloadable on our website where you can go to the resource tab on our website and download. There's a form there, or a printable, where a PDF form where you can, follow a couple steps on how to start homesteading inexpensively. But, this season we really focused on trying to increase the value, especially for those of us who've been homesteading for a little while, really increasing the value of your homestead, making your homestead valuable for you specifically, so that there's so much value on your homestead that to walk away from your homestead would be nearly impossible to do, because your homestead is feeding you, housing you, it's producing all sorts of things for you. So I think out of I have to say, though, out of all of the episodes that we did this season, my favorite one was my interview with Natalie from Living the Dream Permaculture. And I'm happy to say that she has agreed to be back on with us. So hopefully we will be sharing another exciting episode with Natalie because she is just absolutely awesome. And then what was one of your favorite episodes this season that we did?
I think the one, A Financial Storm is Coming, Shelter in Place, was interesting because when we talked about the topic, that title just kind of came about, and it was just interesting, kind of leading into it. And I like I said before, I think it's interesting, kind of looking at the two things, homesteading and then all the stuff that's going on, and really getting that grasp of, homesteading can really help, even though there's expenses to it. Sometimes there's upfront costs for things and whatnot, but maintenance, but it really gets you to focus on trying your best to conserve, So I thought that was a really good topic. And I think in general, when we talk about things like this in this area, I think we find when we look at past episodes, we see that people are really interested in getting into homesteading and how you set the things up. And I think this one has been an interesting topic for us to kind of review. Definitely.
I would agree. I'd have to say that's my second favorite episode this season was that particular episode about the financial storm. Because, you can see it just brewing. I mean, with everything as of the recording of this that's going on in Israel, the world just seems like it's in turmoil. It doesn't seem like it's in turmoil. It is in turmoil. You have protests left and right. Crime is out of control. The homelessness, you walk into town, and when I say town, I'm talking about the city, but, the big city for us. But when you're around there, you can see, and you can almost feel it in the air. It's almost palpable, because it's like you can feel this sense of hopelessness.
Yeah.
And anger, and it's like, anger for what? What are we angry for? And for most people, I think it's angry because of the financial systems, the way that it is right now.
And it's hard. It's not easy. It's difficult. It's, you just go back a few years, and it's more difficult today than it was just 4 years ago.
Right.
And I think you mentioned, you see it on people's faces, how they react, their attitudes. But also, I think you mentioned, you noticed it, you were looking at people's shopping carts one time, and you were noticing
that was just recently,
right? What were you saying?
What I was seeing is that people aren't putting as many things in their shopping cart. It used to be, especially like if you see a mom with 2 kids, that shopping cart's going to be full, right? But you don't see that. At least I don't see that as much. If I'm at a grocery store, I notice people's shopping carts are pretty limited, and that's because of the finances. The finances. People's finances are it's tight, and it's really sad, because if you listen to the reports, they'll tell you everything is great, the economy is doing well, yada, yada. But that's not true, because people are losing jobs. People are getting, salaries cut. They're working 2 to 3 different jobs just to put food on the table.
There was another bank failure recently.
Right. This past weekend. And that's all hush hush. It's amazing.
Yeah,
that was a bank failure, and it's hush hush.
It was on the FDIC's website, because I think we heard a blip about it. Citizens Bank of Sac City, Iowa, and couldn't find a whole lot in the news about it. Actually, really nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But, you go to the FDIC's website and sure enough, they mention it there and,
Mm-hmm.
they were the receiver and who they turned it over and all that. But it's interesting that I think that was the 5th one this year.
Yeah.
And not much of a mention in the news. So,
Something's brewing. There's a storm coming.
But so it's just these types of discussions are good because helps us to get, to really focus, try to the best that we can to be prepared, save where we can. And, that helps our family.
Yeah. Well, next season, it's our intent, hopefully our intention is to talk about raising your own meat on your homestead. So what we're going to be doing is interviewing different people. So hopefully that will all work out. And that new season starts the first week of January.
2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it has been real. And if you don't know by now, we usually take off these last 2 months of the year so that we can be with friends and family and have some downtime over the holiday seasons. So from all of us to all of you, wherever you are in the world,
happy homesteading.
And please be safe out there.